a lot of the evangelical and charismatic groups. And I'm not trying to go after or hurt anybody's feelings here, but I do have to point out that what often goes along with a lot of these groups is the idea of an early, a soon coming return of Christ preceded by a rapture. And the problem with the rapture doctrine is, number one, if we look at the history of the church, and the church that, for example, put the Bible together in the first 7 centuries of Christianity, nobody ever taught the doctrine of a, quote, pre-tribulation rapture. This is actually an idea that was invented. Some say it was some Jesuit. I'm not sure I believe that, but it really goes along with what we call dispensationalism. And dispensationalism is a heresy that pops up in the late 1800s, promoted by a guy who split from the Church of England and was part of a denomination called the Plymouth Brethren. And his name was John Nelson Darby. And Darby came up with this idea of kind of charting out the history of prophecy and coming up with these different divisions in church history, and that God had different plans and ways to save people in different ways. So in the Old Testament, you could be saved with certain types of works, but now that Jesus came, it's all about grace, and there's grace as set in attention against works, and now we can be saved in a different way. But then when Jesus comes back, there'll be a new temple, and he'll reinstitute animal sacrifices, and we'll get a 1,000-year reign of Jesus in Israel, and all of this sort of ridiculous nonsense, which is not true. In fact, this is a huge delusion, and it's a delusion because, number one, the rapture is an idea that's intended to cause you to sit back and wait and actually want the Antichrist to come. So rather than taking action and rather than being involved, Christians are basically pacified and emasculated by thinking that, well, there's no point because everything is destined to become really, really bad, and things never get better. And so we might as well just concede to wickedness and become, I don't know, some weird version of black pill. But when Paul talks about being caught up in the clouds in his letter to the Thessalonians, there's no reason to think that this is any different than the second coming and the general resurrection of all mankind. And that was always what Christianity taught. So if that's the case, and if it's not really, if the so-called basis for the pre-tribulation rapture is very flimsy, like John in the book of Revelation being caught up to see the visions. Oh, that's telling us about the rapture of the Christians before the tribulation. No, John is seeing those events in his day. Okay, this is prior to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. So if John is seeing things that were contemporary and events that were going to happen to the people he was writing to, remember he writes to 7 actual churches in Asia Minor, and he warns those actual churches about events that they're going to experience. Okay, what use would it be to them if it's events that are 2,000 years later? I'm not saying that there's no application to the end of the world in the book of Revelation. I'm just saying that it's out of the context of who he's writing to.